Hey, Pin Dude here, and welcome back to My Vintage Pinball. I want to thank you all for joining me. First of all, I would like to thank all you subscribers to my channel. This past Sunday, we hit 900 subscribers, so that was pretty big for me, and I was pretty excited about that, so thank you. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. If you have pinball friends that don't know about my channel, let them know. In this episode, it's going to be Pinball Restoration Update on 1979 Gottlieb Countdown, and this is going to be episode 5.5. I just haven't gotten enough done this week to do a full episode. I'm mainly repinning connectors at this point. You saw me do that at the end of the last video, and I'm still repinning connectors because I've decided I need to definitely repin every connector in the game. You really should do that on a System 1 anyway. I was just considering the fact that the game was working, and I'm doing a quickie restore, which is not so quick as you see. You know, those edge connectors, I'm looking in the connectors, and you can see a lot of the pins are flat and corroded and discolored. So they all need to be done. So it's time consuming, but it's worth doing. And all the pins you need for the game cost under $20. You know, if you don't have the crimping tool, get the Amazon crimper. It's only $23, and everything else is just normal tools that you have anyway, like your cutting pliers and a little screwdriver. So there's not much involved in doing it. And once you start getting into repinning, you get in the groove, and it starts to go real quick. And you spread it out over a bunch of different days, and that's what I've been doing. You know, I've been crimping about an hour every day. I get home from work, spend an hour re-crimping connectors and then stop. And then the next night I'll do another hour. But also in this episode, I want to get the insert board out here and start taking that apart. And I'll show you what we're going to do to that insert board to rebuild it, repaint it, and go through the wire and harness that is on the insert panel. So that's all in this episode. It's also, the holiday season. We're only 2 weeks away from Christmas now. So, of course, there's been all the decorating in the house, getting the tree set up, getting gifts bought, starting to wrap gifts. It's just crazy. And also, for the last 2 weeks, I've been on binge watching the Ben Heck show, all the episodes that I hadn't seen of it from years past. As you know, Ben Heck left that show. But he is starting to post some videos on his own channel, so if you're interested in Ben Heck, definitely check out his personal channel, which I believe is Ben Heck Hacks on YouTube. But watching that led me to break out my Atari 2600. So I've been going around cleaning all my carts. I rebuilt the system, I rebuilt the joysticks, I rebuilt the paddle controllers. So I've had a lot of distractions over the last couple weeks, but we're still working through this countdown, and we'll get it done. So let's get started with that 1979 Gottlieb Countdown right now. All right, so unfortunately I'm at the stage in the restoration here where it's really all about repinning connectors. So I've been working on this connector here, which is the connector that goes between the CPU board and the driver board. As you can see, there's 25 wires on each connector. So this has been taking me about 2 hours, and I've run into one little problem, and I'll show you that in a second. I got all the pins done except 2 more here on this side. So I'm going to remove one, and I'll show you what I'm doing here. So I'm using my little Molex tool like I showed you in the last video. And they're coming out pretty easy. I got the knack now that I've done, I've probably done 70 connectors already. 70 pins, I mean. So yeah, you saw how quick that came out. And then I'm just snipping the end, the old one off, and stripping 1/8 of an inch of wire. And here's where the problem came in. Up till this connector, everything was 18 gauge wire, and I'm using the connectors that I found on both pinrepair.com and the PinWiki, I believe, and it's Molex part number 08-52-0072. But the problem I'm having is these are obviously made for like 18 to 20 gauge wire. And all these other wires in this connector are 22 gauge, and these don't crimp on tight enough. So I've come up with there's an easy workaround, but it adds more time to repin in each of the connectors. So let me crimp this on. And of course, as I've been doing this, it's going a lot faster. Once you get the knack of it and get in the groove, it goes pretty quick. The hardest thing is like getting this lined up to make sure you got a good connection. You see I'm using a flashlight here so I can really see what I'm doing. All right, so I used the crimper that is the correct size for this pin that I'm using. And because this is 22 gauge wire, it's not crimped down tight enough. So I have to do this in two crimping stages. Crimp it in the bigger slot first, and then I'm crimping it in the second slot. So it adds double the time to repin this connector. But not a big deal. And then I'll show you after I do this crimp. Now it's kind of stuck in the tool, and I got to get my little screwdriver in there and pop it out of the tool. Sometimes they come out easy, sometimes they don't. That one wasn't too bad. And now we have a nice crimp there. So I would assume that there's a slightly different part number that is for 22 to 24 gauge wire, just like there is on the Trifurcon pins. But I haven't looked yet. If I get a chance before I release this video, I'll update that info towards the end of the video. But I had a bunch of these in stock, so they seem to be, they're working fine. It's just the extra time involved in doing two crimps on each connector instead of what you're usually able to do with this tool, which is just one crimp per connector. And like I said, it's taken me 2 hours to do this connector. So before I pop that in, as I do on every pin that I repin, I find the wire, the other end of the wire, and I'm checking for continuity. And then once I know that I have good continuity, then it goes back in the housing. And I move on to the next one, which happens to be the last one that I need to do on this connector. So I'll finish this up, and then we'll go into the game room, plug it in, and then move on. So as you can see, it's a complete disaster in my game room right now. All these are Christmas gifts that need to be unboxed and wrapped, and it's a lot of the reason why I just haven't been getting a lot done in the last week. But Christmas is only 2 weeks away now, so hopefully we'll get this kind of cleaned up in the next few days and get everything wrapped, and I can get part of my game room back. Still have this pile of junk here on the left too. Haven't got time to go through that yet either. But all right, so now that we spent 2 hours repinning this little harness here, we can plug it back in. And obviously you want to take extra care to make sure you have it on correctly. So Gottlieb had these little stickers on here. Hopefully your game still has them, and that will show you the orientation of where they go. Also make sure you check your before pictures, which I just did before I came in here, and it is correct that these labels are facing out and they are oriented so they are in the proper position to read them. Now also, after you repin these, don't plug these connectors in until your game is set up and ready to be plugged in. What wears out these edge connectors is the constant on and off, So you want to plug these in once and hopefully leave them on forever until, something needs some major service, because every time you put it on and take it off, you're wearing out the tension on those connectors. So I'm at the point where, the game's set up and, I'm ready to plug this in and have it plugged in for good. The other thing to take into account is when you repin a connector, you lose a little bit of length on the wire. It's not much, but I'm finding on these Gottlieb connectors, they didn't give you much extra length on the wire. So, you know, you definitely only want to clip off as much as you need to. And then the next bad thing would be if you accidentally have a bad crimp and you need to cut that off and recrimp it again. Well, now you're losing even more wire. So definitely take a lot of care when you crimp these and try to get it right the first time. So let's plug this end in. The other thing is these crappy plastic posts that they Gottlieb mounted the boards on. They really wiggle around. So these are going to be hard to get on, which is a good thing. That means that our new crimp terminals have good tension. And once they're on there, they are on there. And we should not have any problems with flaky connectors. So you see that fit real good. So that connector is now done. So now this is what I've repinned so far. We have this harness going from the power supply to the CPU, and then this like 50-pin harness from the CPU board to the driver board. All right, so now I'm at the point where I screwed up a little bit. I have 3 more of these edge connectors that were in the cabinet that are part of the bottom board assembly. I should have repinned these when I had the bottom board out of the game on the workbench in the garage. At that point, I was hemming and hawing on whether I was going to repin the whole game or not, because I know how time-consuming it is. But my better judgment has come over me, and I know for a fact that if you have a System 1 and you're going through the whole game, definitely repin every connector. You know, it costs about $20 or less in connector pins, and yes, it may take, you know, 4 or 5 hours to repin every connector in the game, but it's well worth it. So now I'm going to have to do them here in the cabinet because I don't want to have to take the whole bottom board out again. Luckily, these only have, you know, maybe 6 or 7 wires per connector, so it's not going to be that bad. And then there's one more on the soundboard, which has, I believe, 6 wires. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then we'll move on. All right, so we finally got the insert panel out in the garage, and we're going to start tearing it down. I'm going to start by pulling the displays off. I'm also hoping to reuse these bulbs. Let's see if they're 47s or 44s. Oh, good. They're 47s. So 47s are the lower light output bulb. 44s is what these games came with, but they're a higher, you know, amperage bulb. They're brighter, but they also draw more amps. So I always use 47s in all my games. I will check all these to make sure they're all 47s. A lot of times you'll see a mix, you know. Sometimes there'll still be some like original bulbs, 44s in there. But these look like they were all replaced. They're real shiny. And you can see, I guess, on the back glass it says Countdown here. So it's like a flasher bulb, a regular bulb, flasher bulb, regular bulb. So that, you know, you kind of get that flasher attract mode effect on the Countdown. Since the System 1 games don't have any attract mode, you know, all the GI's just on. There's no attract mode. So these flasher bulbs kind of make the game look a little flashier when it's just sitting there not being played. So just going to tear down the front of this, and then we need to get the wiring harness off the back. And I will show you how I do that. But for now, I'll just work on getting this stripped down, and I'll be right back. All right, so we got everything stripped off the front here. This board's made of, I think it's MDF or some kind of particle board. It's really cheap stuff, let's put it that way. You can see I got a chunk out here, and you know, there's some cracking and stuff. I don't think I'm going to get too involved with fixing that. I mean, I'm going to sand everything kind of smooth, and we're going to repaint this with a Krylon gloss white. So here's the displays. These Gottlieb displays, these Futaba displays, they tend to rarely go bad. I haven't seen too many of these that actually go bad. Unlike a Williams or Bally, who was using the gas plasma displays that kind of outgas over time. These tend to, the only problem they really get is they go dim. But if you send coil voltage to these end pins for like 2 seconds, it'll heat up these little wires. They'll turn red like in a toaster, and it'll kind of, I guess, burn off something in the display, and it'll make them bright again. It's really cool. If you need more info on that, if you have a dim display, one of these Futaba Gottlieb displays, check out pinrepair.com in the System 1 or System 80 section, or I'm sure it's on the Pin Wiki for System 1 too. And if we fire up my game and I happen to have a dim display, I will show you that procedure. But from what I recall, all these displays looked all right. So the displays I'm going to bring inside, I don't want to leave them out here in the cold. You know, we've been down in the teens the last few nights here. And although I have the heater running when I'm out here working, I don't leave it on overnight. Bag up all the bulbs, we'll go through them, make sure they're all 47s. I noticed a couple of them looked like older bulbs when I took them out. And then I have just a few pieces of hardware that need to go through the ultrasonic and the tumbler. All the main brackets and handles and stuff that go on this panel, I tumbled and polished all that stuff back when I did all the other cabinet parts. So those all those major brackets for this insert board are already all polished up and ready to go. So now we need to get the wiring harness off. As you can see, it's quite an elaborate harness. So we need to get this off the back because I'm going to need to tape off the back here when I paint. And I also want to clean up the back of this panel, sand it a little bit. All right, so to get the harness off, we just have just some bolts that are holding some of these plates on here. And then, of course, the wiring harness clips. But there's a couple areas where there's wires soldered to the bulbs. So we need to get these off. We need to unsolder them. So I took very good pictures of the back of this so I know where these wires go. And I also like to take a Sharpie and mark on the wood where the wires go. I know some people don't like Sharpie marks, but I find it to be useful. You know, if I need to service or replace this bulb, it's always helpful to have that mark there. Or for the next person that works on this game or owns this game. So I always put Sharpie marks. So I'm just going to go around and label, like here I have a white with a red trace, so I'm going to do white W/red. Here I have white with silver. And I'm just going to go around and label the board for all these wires. Alright, so now I'm just going to take my soldering iron and remove these wires from the bulb sockets so that we can pull this wiring harness off. And this solder is very ugly looking on these sockets, very dull. So we need to pre-tin, and it's a good idea that these get resoldered anyway. Alright, so now I can remove the rest of the bolts, and we'll be able to pull this harness right off. Alright, so as long as I didn't miss anything here, this should pull right off. Oh, well, of course I missed these bolts here. I tell you, I'm loving this little Harbor Freight 4.8 volt screwdriver that I think I paid like $7 with a 20% off coupon. This thing's been working great, and it holds its charge like forever. I think I've charged it once since I bought it. All right, so this should pull right off, and we'll set it aside. All right, so that's as far as I'm going to take the panel down. On other games, you've seen me remove all this ground braided and the sockets. I'm not going to go that far with this game. The main point here is to make this panel nice and glossy white, so it looks nice and fresh, and it'll have a nice gloss finish on it, which helps reflect the light to the back glass. So today I was at a Walmart that I don't normally go to, doing some Christmas shopping, and I looked in the tool aisle, and this particular Walmart had a ton of Stanley tools. So I looked at them, and if it wasn't Christmas time, I probably would have bought more tools. But I was really attracted to these. If you watch my channel, you know I'm kind of obsessed with screwdrivers. So this is a two-piece set. It's a flat blade and a number 2 screwdriver. And this was $3.97. So what's that, $1.98 a screwdriver. They have magnetic tips and the nice Stanley grips, just like my little 6-in-1 screwdriver that I like so much. So let's open this up and check it out. It's obviously not frustration-free packaging, so it's probably going to take me a while. I'll be right back. All right, got them open up. Yeah, they're real nice, you know, for just under $4. Got a nice grip, pretty thick grip, better than my, you know, 30-year-old Craftsman's here. Feel nice in the hand. Got a nice weight to them, and yeah, the tip is magnetic, so that always nice to have magnetic screwdrivers when you're working on pinball machines. So yeah, glad I bought these. They'll work real nice. All right, so I am back to repinning here in the cabinet, which is not convenient, but I've already got a couple connections done. The main thing is getting enough light. I got a work light above my head. I'm using the flashlight here. Wish I would have done this on the workbench, as I mentioned earlier, but this is kind of like working in the field, you know, if you're doing field repairs. So it's not that bad. Just not my favorite way to work, that's for sure. And these ones I'm really checking and triple checking and finding the other end of the wire here and using my meter continuity to make sure I have that crimp good. Pulling on it, you know, I don't want to make a mistake. It's going to be much easier to make a mistake working in the cabinet like this than it is on the workbench, you know, where you can see everything a lot better. So I got this connector, this connector, this connector, and this one on the soundboard to do. So I am just going to work at it. It'd probably take me about 45 minutes or so to do all these. So I'll let you know when I get back. All right, so I'm on the fourth and last connector that I need to do in here. The other three were edge style connectors. This one is the one that goes to the power supply. This is a 0.156 slide-on connector. So I've switched back to trifurcon pins, and I've switched back to my special release tool to get the pins out, which in my case I just use a little jeweler screwdriver. I think they do make an actual tool for this, but there's really no need for it. You just need your little flat blade jeweler screwdriver to push the tang that holds the pin in. And if you push it down just right, it'll come right out. And then I'll clip the old pin off as close to the pin as possible so we lose the least amount of wire. And then strip back 1/8 of an inch on the insulation. And then on these, I have the proper two sizes of trifurcon pins. There's one for 22 gauge wire and there's one for 18 gauge wire. So the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 wires that were in here were 22 gauge. This is the ground wire, the green ground wire. This is 18 gauge, so I need to run to the garage to get the proper trifurcon pin for this one. I'll be right back. All right, so I got my right pin here, so I'm going to load it into the crimping tool. And then get my wire. I'm using this little flashlight here so I can kind of see how to get the wire properly in the connector. This is the trickiest part of crimping, is just getting the wire set up in the tool properly. And then we'll crimp it down and then carefully check to make sure that wire's in there. It looks good. So now I'll take my continuity meter. This is the ground wire, so any of these grounds on the power board, and we get the beep. So I know I have a good crimp on there. I give it a little tug, make sure it's nice and tight, and then we will slide it back into the connector until it locks in. And there we go. So that was the last pin that I needed to do. All right, so I got all the connectors done in the cabinet now. There are 3 here that go up to the head, 2 edge connectors, and 1 slide-on 156 connector. And then I also did this edge connector for the soundboard, or the whatever you want to call that board. So those are all done. Now we're not done repinning because we're going to have to repin all the connectors on the wiring harness for the insert board, including all the displays. But so this did end up taking me about 45 minutes to repin all these connectors. Not that bad. Would have been better to do it on the bench in the workshop, had I thought of it at the time. But it's done now, so we can move on. All right, now that we got all our pinball projects done for the day, let's play some Atari. I was playing this last night, and I lost to the computer 22-2, so Pong is obviously not my specialty. I play it about as good as I play pinball. Great game, though. All right, so there you have it. Episode number 5.5 of Pinball Restoration Update on 1979 Gottlieb Countdown. Didn't get a lot done in this episode. Like I said, I've been repinning connectors pretty much all throughout the week, so that was mainly what I got done. But that's something that needs to be done, and although it's time consuming, it doesn't cost much, and it'll make a big difference in the end. It'll make the game so much more reliable. So we also got the insert panel all stripped down, so now this week I can start working on that and get that painted. So in the next episode, which will be part number 6 of the restoration of Gottlieb Countdown, we should have the head completely back together. You know, so that pretty excited to have that happen, and then be getting the playfield out here. So that'll be next. So I apologize. During this episode, I had some audio issues. I don't know if the little lapel mic that I use went bad, or if maybe I have a problem with the 25-foot extension cord for the microphone that I use. I switched to a new lapel mic, so hopefully the problem goes away. If it doesn't, I'll have to keep looking into it. But I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you learned something in this episode, and hope you look forward to the next episode, part number 6, coming up hopefully in the next, hopefully before Christmas. If not next week, during the following week or the following weekend. I'll hopefully get that episode up. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like. Check me out on Facebook. It's My Vintage Pinball starring Pindude. I post some video updates up there, and sometimes if I have spare time, I'll get some other content up on the Facebook page. If you have a question or a comment, give me an email. The email is fierodoug@gmail.com. That info is down below as well. So that'll do it. I am Pindude. Thanks for watching My Vintage Pinball, and I will see you next time.